The 2024 A&M football season is officially in the books. Texas A&M falls to USC 35-31 here in the Las Vegas Bowl. Joining me, Travis Brown. I'm Tyler Shaw. And Travis, Mike Elko, not a happy head coach after the way this one ended.
No, not at all. And he pointed the finger first at the defensive secondary and then kind of back at himself for not having the defensive secondary. I mean, he is a defensive secondary coach. That was his entire background, and so I'm sure it's especially stinging when that was the problem. USC with 192 yards, I believe, passing, and 160 of those came in the second half. They overcame a 17-point deficit USC did in the second half, mostly through the passing game. And so it was exactly Mike Elko's worst nightmare of an outcome from what his history was in coaching and in playing football.
Yeah, I mean, how do you, because, he said it, this was what we've dealt with all year, that's been the issue. Is it an easy fix to, something like when you're having these kind of issues, they just can't defend the pass?
Yeah, it's hard to say because a lot of that is personnel, and the transfer portal for players entering the transfer portal closes tomorrow. They can still try to go out there and get some guys, but now in the world of NIL and revenue sharing coming up, that involves a price tag and some management of how you want to spend your money in that regard. And there was some other points of need. A&M needed some wide receivers. They got some in the portal. They were going to need some edge rushers, and they got one in the portal. And so it's kind of one of those things where Mike Elko has talked about it there and said, they did a lot to improve the culture of the team, and that resulted in some wins this season. Right. But the talent isn't quite there. When he said it was a problem all season, I didn't necessarily think the secondary was a consistent issue.
Right.
But there was the big play or two in the game. And that can, of course, turn a game when you have a busted coverage that turns into a touchdown. It always was something. It was always a key to the game.
Right.
The defensive secondary didn't need to bust a coverage, but it also didn't feel as quite the same as a liability as he said. But he kind of was able to pull things back a little bit and say they weren't really able to run much zone coverage this year because of their inability to play sound zone coverage. They had to play man, and they didn't really have the talent to play man. So it'll be interesting to see how they fix that, because that is a challenging fix moving forward.
Well, it doesn't help that, Will Lee doesn't play, so you wonder, would that have, fixed some things?
Javon Thomas doesn't play either.
Right, so, that is obviously plays a factor into it. It is kind of ironic, though, with how much, he harped on, the secondary having just a terrible game. They do come away with 3 interceptions. So,
right.
The stats kind of are there a little bit.
Well, but that's another kind of point to this, too, is that you look at having seen this USC team now on the field with the roster they were able to put out there with the transfer portal and everything else like that. A&M was the deeper team. They were the better team.
Oh, for sure.
And so to kind of put up that performance, the USC's quarterback, he started 4 games. He still has some rust to shake off and some moves to make. He made some bad decisions. So it's like, yes, they were able to come up with those turnovers, but they're not going to get those same kind of turnover looks in any team again in the SEC that they were playing this year. So
right.
It was able to help mitigate the 2 interceptions that A&M threw, but
right.
Yeah.
At one point, I thought those 2 interceptions were going to be proved to be costly. But yeah, when you throw in the 3 that A&M got back, they kind of turnovers kind of offset in this one. To me, this game seemed almost like a microcosm of the entire season. The way I thought offensively started out great. Things to kind of seem to be churning along in that first quarter. Things kind of stalled out for a while. Mm-hmm. Second half happens. They get into that tempo offense. They go up 24-7, and things seem to be they seem to be playing their best ball, and they might run away with this thing. And then USC comes back, and in the last quarter and a half of this ball game, things, the wheels kind of fell off.
Yeah.
So I just think of this game, the way A&M started 7-1, and then the losses started coming, but they still had hope. With a game away from the SEC championship game, but then you look at they lost 3 of the last 4, now 4 of the last 5. I don't know. To me, it just kind of seemed like a summary of their season.
That was very poetic. You want to write my game story?
Yeah,
that you did that
there
well.
You go.
And offensively, it was interesting because it was maybe one of the better games of the offensive line in pass blocking. It was definitely probably the best game from the wide receivers, minus the drops. I mean, you get those back, and it's an A-plus game from the wide receivers in a unit that has been a liability for A&M all season. Marcel Reed is throwing the ball around pretty well and, doing what he does well, with really only one of those interceptions being partially his fault. And they did, go ahead and they did kind of what I said they should do. Well, they ran the RPO a lot in that game, and it was all because they had to completely change their identity. They've been a run-first offense the entire season behind Le'Veon Moss. Even in the Auburn game, the Texas game, they were trying to get things going on the ground with Armani Daniels and E.J. Smith. This game with Reuben Owens not at 100%, Armani Daniels out, and E.J. Smith really the only other back there. They just kind of said, to heck with the run game. We're going to run a little bit to keep them honest, but we're going to run RPO a lot. And it worked, especially when they were able to get that first down. They were able to go tempo and really catch USC on their heels. But there was some weird play calls in there on third down when, things were clicking with that 4 or 5 yard intermediate passing game on the RPO. All of a sudden, it was roll out and try to chunk something way downfield. There was 2 or 3 that they tried to do a shot play on third down when you just needed to pick up 3 or 4 yards, 5 yards to get the first down and keep things moving. That was a little bit of a head scratcher too. I didn't give on my rundown really high coaching marks for that, for not having the secondary coached up like Mike Elko said, and for the penalties in this game, because penalties have been another huge factor in the season. Yeah,
it was. The play calling was questionable at times, and we've kind of seen that at various times in the season. I don't know, how much do you take out of a bowl? I mean, we talked about what the bowl games really mean nowadays, but are there things we learned today that maybe moving forward in the next season? Do you anticipate there being big changes? I don't know, coming out of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you want to follow the narratives that the players and coaches were pushing, is that this is the unofficial start to next season.
Yeah.
And that this was going to be a springboard into off season and then the next season with the players they have been returning. And you kind of do have to take a little bit for this because, a lot of the guys that out here are guys that are going to be returning. They have 20 guys in the transfer portal, but a lot of those were second string guys on the fringe. Most of everybody that you saw out here, for the most part, were guys who got a lot of reps this season and guys that are coming back next season. And so it's not like you can say, well, this wasn't the Texas Bowl last year, where it's a completely depleted roster. And so there is some concern. I think that it did show that there is some holes. Now, there was a lot of guys who were banged up and got banged up in bowl practice leading into this game and weren't at 100%. But I think for as much as everybody was saying that this could be a springboard into next season, as everyone thought A&M should probably roll in this game with what they were bringing back, it really leaves a lot to be desired and brings up a lot more question marks than there were answers on this season. The thing I go back to, and I'll kind of pose this to you, I mean, how much of this season was A&M's schedule, was A&M overachieving, taking advantage of some bounces that went their way? Like, I have a hard time, especially after this game and how the season rounded out, saying where this program is after year one of Mike Elko. I certainly think it is trending upward from where it was under Jimbo Fisher, but I'm having trouble making heads or tails necessarily of which way the arrow is pointing for this team.
I've had my reservations through a lot of this. The 7-1 start, which was great for A&M. part of it, I looked at the schedule and said, well, who are they actually beating? And then you have a game like LSU that seemed like a turning point. How much of that was kind of we've talked about this before, but how much were wins like that kind of happenstance and things bouncing their way? And I'm kind of with you. I don't know. I do think the arrow is up, but I don't know how steep of a. I don't know how you say this, but how steep of an arrow, I guess. How
the grade of the slope upward.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think they are on that trajectory because I think that's more of a testament, though, to where they came from, because I think it was a mess the past couple of years. I don't think it's a mess right now. I just don't think they are at that level. And looking at next year's schedule, I mean, a lot of things can change with rosters and everything, but as of this moment, I don't feel super confident that they are taking that next step and are going to be back in those same shoes of, trying to make an SEC championship game.
I think where they were on offense, when you look at the offensive side of the ball, where they were at wide receiver, they overcame a lot with their run game, because I think there is a talent deficiency at wide receiver that they've started to address through the transfer portal and will need to address moving forward. So that was probably when weighing of how much of it is coaching, how much of it is just lack of talent. I think wide receiver played in. I think the offensive line played well. I think quarterback, once they figured out Marcel Reed was going to be the guy, he played well. And some of that's hard to gauge because they were without Le'Veon Moss, who did really well this season. Yeah. Defensively, I think the secondary underperformed. The defensive line underperformed for a good portion of the season. The defense just wasn't as sound as I think we thought they were going to be, especially like after the Notre Dame game, when the defense was what kept them in the game.
Right.
And Notre Dame look at where they are now. So I don't think that they're far off. I think that they do need to continue to pick up talent that is more apt to the season that the systems that they're trying to run. But it feels a little further off than maybe I thought it was a few games ago.
Right. And that's kind of been the roller coaster of the season of trying to gauge, wow, where's this team at? And at one point we thought, this could be a playoff team. There's been a lot of ups and downs. I think they're going in the right direction, I don't think they're there yet. Or
a season that looks like was going to be graded an A, even if they didn't make the SEC title game. But with that loss at Auburn, with some of the even going back to maybe the Bowling Green game early, and then this game, it feels like a C+. It feels like it passed, and it was better than last season, but it feels like you dropped from like an A- to a C+.
Yeah, I mean, you look at November on, and for sure, just the way this thing kind of ended. But year one of Mike Elko, Texas A&M finishes 8-5. USC finishes 7-6 with the win there. And we'll see how next year can kind of go for them. But if you gave a grade for the Las Vegas Bowl experience, what would the grade be?
Listen, we've talked about this a lot this season, and how from the media perspective, because it's all about us, that bowl games have really deteriorated over the last few years. Going back to the 2009, I got to cover the Fiesta Bowl with TCU and Boise State, and we got like a fossil water. You went.
Nice.
It was a good destination. We had a lot of fun. We got some bowl gifts. We got some free food. It was a cool venue, cool game. Like, I would be excited to come back here, and I think that there was a decent amount of Aggie fans here for a not premium playoff level bowl game. Right. But I think if they came back here, there would be a spot for more people to come out to.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Allegiant Stadium for the first time. Very nice venue, and of course, being in Las Vegas is always fun. But that for the last time in 2024, we'll wrap this thing up.
We'll wrap it up with this.
Okay,
because this is my first year on TV.
Yes.
How do you grade? We've talked about Marcel Reed's production.
Yes.
Through. How do you grade my production through the season, my growth?
Okay, so we talked about A&M's grade and how they're trending upward, but I don't know if it's like this. It's more like this. You are on a steeper incline. You're
it's a low bar.
Yeah, your growth you're on a higher trajectory right now than I have confidence in the A&M squad at the moment. So I would I'd give you an A for the way you are trending upward.
And
Travis.
kudos to you for not killing me this season for many of the flaws that I have. So it's a win-win on the KBTX side.
You've been a great partner on air and around, but that's going to do it for us. For Travis Brown, I'm Tyler Shaw reporting from Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas.